Let's introduce our guests in the studio this morning. We are going to talk about Huduma Namba. And Phillip Lemarasia is the Senior Administrator for the National Integrated Information Management System. Huduma Namba. Okay? And the other guest in the studio is a guest from Estonia, Silvia Lips. She is from Tallinn University of Technology, TalTech, a PhD student, but also very much aware of how Estonia moved from zero digitization to almost 100% digitization of government services. Very good morning to you, Phillip and Silvia. Welcome to the Situation Room. So, Phillip, it's good to have you here in the show, and we call that the hot seat. We're not going to make it very, very hot. We'll just, because you're here to tell us about Huduma Namba, and we know what we've been told about Huduma Namba. If you don't have Huduma. So before those things come into effect, we're going to squeeze the person who's in charge.
You're welcome to do that.
Ahead of time.
Yes, no
Silvia,
worries.
welcome.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
It's a pleasure to be here
Right.
today.
Right. So tell us about what you have done. What brings you to Kenya?
Well, actually, I think Estonia has been in many countries because of digitalization that we have done in our small country. Of course, Kenya is much, much bigger than Estonia. However, I think we have been starting our journey already in the beginning of 2000s. So, and we have come to the case where our government services are 99% online right now. So I think we have gone through a long, long way, and we are really happy to share our experience with other countries, so to that all those other countries also could learn from our experience and maybe avoid some of the obstacles that we have been struggling. And also to give you some insight, exactly also our success, to share what we have done so far.
Great. And Phillip, we have talked about Huduma Namba on this show a number of times. We even had a guest, the Cabinet Secretary for ICT, was here telling us about the whole idea behind Huduma Namba and what it would be able to do for us and how far it would go. But just give us the progress so far on having one national integrated information management system. What is it? How far are we?
Thank you. Good morning, Kenyans. Now, Huduma Namba concept, we need to demystify this Huduma Namba thing. First of all, why Huduma? Where is this name coming from? Ideally, the idea is to ensure that we have efficient and effective service provision to Kenyans. And going back the memory lane, in this country, the best example you can talk about service provision are the Huduma centers that we have in this country, whereby Huduma Kenya Secretariat. By the way, Huduma Kenya Secretariat and Huduma Namba are different entities. I think we have been mixed up. Many people don't differentiate the same. Huduma Kenya Secretariat is under Ministry of Public Service. Huduma Namba is under Ministry of Interior. But more or less, the word Huduma is synonymous with Kenyans for service delivery success under Huduma Kenya Secretariat, whereby you have different services provided in one room. Different counters, you come into that one room, you can get services in different counters, and that created the name Huduma service provision. So our idea with the Huduma Namba project is to ensure that we collapse many documentation that gives you access to services. You collapse all those different documentations into one document in the name of a digital ID called Huduma. In that sense, we'll help you also get efficient and effective service. You'll get efficient Huduma service provision. Huduma is service. So if you're able to put all those documents into one card, and that card enables you to get efficient service, then you're helping you get better Huduma. So that word Huduma was coined as a result of what I'm trying to explain. But the original name of the project is NIMS, National Integrated Identity Management System, NIMS. But you see that sounds mouthful.
Yeah.
It's easier to call it Huduma. It will resonate many Kenyans easily. So that's actually the idea of government. Instead of you carrying your NHF card, carrying your NSSF card, carrying your your driving
ID.
license, carrying your ID, carrying your birth certificate. We put all those documentations into one digital card. Of course, there's the issue of data protection and data security. We can talk about that. But we've also made great strides towards ensuring that in as much as we collapse all those identity documentations into one, the protection of one's data is given priority. And that's why we even took a lot of effort to develop the Data Protection Act 2020 and its attendant regulations, data protection civil regulations, to operationalize our bit of data protection.
Okay.
Yes.
So since you rolled out the NIMS, Integrated Identity, not Information, it's a National Integrated Identity
Management
System.
Yeah.
And people have applied. Several million people have applied already. How far have you gone into integrating all those? My ID number, my passport number, my birth certificate number, my KRA PIN, my business licenses, my NHIF, my NSSF, my NTSA driving license, my logbooks. How far have you gone into integrating all those? Because I have a Huduma number.
Good. Thank you to hear that. Great.
I'm one of those Kenyans.
We're still producing.
He's talking and looking at me because he knows I don't have a Huduma card or number. He does that all the time. Yes.
Okay. Just to answer to your question there, we started the project in 2018. Initially, you realize that we had to develop legal instruments where the project will have been anchored, because again, you cannot just start something that is not having legal foundation. So there was an amendment done to the Registration Act, Status Law Miscellaneous Amendment, that actually established NIMS. Section 9A of that Status Law Miscellaneous Amendment established NIMS as a department in the Ministry of Interior. Now, that was the first foundation that we had to start off. From there, the President actually gazetted the operationalization now of NIMS. Yeah. So that was done. After that, we had now to start doing the rollout of the project. So we announced the mass registration exercise that many Kenyans participated in around 2019. And in this particular exercise, we were able to register 37 million Kenyans across the country. Actually, not only Kenyans, that 7 million persons were registered. And persons in this particular case, we mean Kenyan citizens, foreign nationals, and refugees. They were all registered. But to realize that when we did that, a section of the population or some institutions felt like we did not have proper adequate mechanisms to protect the data. So a case was taken to court against us. We were given an injunction. So we had to stop the project for some time and deal with the court case. So from 2019 May, when we finished the registration, we were in abeyance. An injunction stopped us from proceeding. So we prosecuted our issues in court the whole of 2019 from May all the way up to 2020, end of January, when a ruling was delivered on that particular case. But before the ruling came out, we had actually answered to the issues raised in court by developing a Data Protection Act. Luckily enough, there was a bill on data protection that had been engineered by Minister of ICT, but it had not been completed. So we picked it up. And of course, working with the Minister of ICT, who are actually very strong partners in the project, we were able to deliver that data protection to make it an act of parliament. We took it through the whole journey and became an act of parliament. After that, in the ruling of the court, they said, okay, fine, you have complied. You have a Data Protection Act, you can proceed. But again, you must ensure that you develop other legal instruments, namely the regulations to operationalize the Data Protection Act. So we did data protection civil regulations to operationalize that particular aspect of Data Protection Act in relation to what we are doing. Then also the court said we need also to develop regulations on the Status Law Miscellaneous Amendment to the Registration Act that established us, because we didn't have regulations for that. So we proceeded very fast and did 2 regulations, as we were instructed. That took us the whole of 2020 up to November, when the 2 regulations were approved in Parliament, when they were accented in Parliament. Now, with the 2 regulations in place, with the Data Protection Act in place, with the Miscellaneous Amendment to the Registration Act in place, we had now 4 pieces of legislation that ideally allowed us to proceed with whatever had remained in terms of our project. That is now doing the data cleaning of the data we collected, and subsequent production of Huduma card. That's when now we started the rollout of Huduma card issuance across the country, having the 4 pieces of legislation in place. And we did the rollout of the card from November 2020 all the way. We proceeded, we continued all over the country until another matter was now brought up again in court, where it was said that we have not yet prepared data protection impact assessment, which is a conditionality of the Data Protection Act, which we had actually pushed for the implementation. So there is currently an order against us not to proceed, but what we have done is we are complying with the order. So there's a ruling coming up. We don't want to talk about it so much, but of course there's a ruling coming up on that on 18th of March. We'll see what the court says, but we're in compliance with that last order of October last year. That is the one that has affected our operations as at now. But once we're done with this particular legal hurdle and the court grants us the way forward, then we can now be able to proceed and give the rest of Kenyans who did not get the cards, we give them their cards.
Does any of this sound familiar for you, Silvia? Or when you had a rollout of something like this in Estonia, for example,
Yes,
with the digitization?
It was
Does
actually it was actually so funny to listen, because I think the Estonia was facing exactly similar issues in the beginning, because every start is a hard one. And when the first ID cards came out in 2001 and even in 2006, when the cards were already 5 years been in hands of the people, the cards were not very actively used, because there were no services that were integrated. So it took some time for the government to understand that, of course, now when we have digitalized everything and we have every person has already the card to access the services, then now what kind of services we need to actually offer to our citizens to make the best out of the card that we have. So I think it is very normal that these initiatives, first they need to get to the people, as you are doing right now, that as many people as have this kind of unique identifier to be able to access those services. And then also government in parallel actually should think already now what could be these services that can be delivered to the people so that they could benefit from it. Well, Estonia started from the tax side, but every country has, I think this kind of cookie what to offer to the people, because Estonia has a quite unique system that if you are declaring your taxes, usually you get some refund.
Yes,
and everybody wants to have some money, right? and every citizen that had this kind of access to the EID, they could already, and they declared their taxes online, they could the refund really fast. So everyone wanted to try that because, they wanted to get their money back. So I think, I don't know what is the candy for the Kenyans that could facilitate.
Was data protection an issue? Was it an issue amongst people to say, look, we are giving all our information to government. How are we then guaranteed that our identification is safe?
Well, in Estonia, we have a unique situation where the trust towards the government is actually pretty high. So, and why it's so is that the government is acting quite transparently, and the people, we have even developed it further. We had at the time when the ID card was rolled out, all the data protection regulations in place, and of course we need to take into account Estonia. Now we need to also be in line with the European side. So in that sense, you are a little bit even privileged that you can do it everything inside your own country, right? So, but that time we had local or the country regulations for the data protection. So, and people actually did not have the issue with their data, because they also see that the benefit they could have from having this unique identifier was much greater than giving away a piece of their identity, maybe.
When does an individual, a citizen of Estonia, get integrated into the system? At what point in their life? How are they integrated into the system?
It's a very good question, but in Estonia, you actually first, when the child is born, actually, and the hospital send the data to the population registry, and the child receives the unique identifier. So before even the child has the name, it has the unique identifier.
It's from birth.
It's from birth, yes. So, and everything else that builds up on that is already continuous way.
It's very interesting. So essentially, if it was Eric, so it would be Huduma identifier number 34678. Then the name, and then
for a number of days.
Yes, then the name follows.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, Estonians mostly know their ID code by heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common that you go for the pharmacy and they ask you not the document or your name. They said, please say your ID code, and they give you the medicine or prescription or whatever. So
Based on your number.
based on number, it's
It's not even
11-digit code, and most of the people know it.
So what you're saying is that with digitization, every aspect of service that you can expect from your government, and every department or agency or institution also has all this information in place. So simply by mentioning that number, all the information that is required is actually available.
Well, yeah, but of course on the need to know basis, so it depends on the service. It's not so that the government official who provides the healthcare service can access the data of some other field or financial or tax information. It is definitely very strictly only available for those who need to work with current set of data.
So there are various layers to
Yes.
the access to information, but all of it is in the same.
Yes, it's the
system.
role-based access basically for the data. So in Estonia now we have implemented recent years to increase even more the transparency. We have this kind of system that every person can see who has been accessing their data. In our citizen portal, we have a service, data tracker service, so that I can go there and see what kind of government officials and why have accessed our data. So you can be sure that no one else has done that. So
And is it like 100% transparent to the citizen? Can I tell when the intelligence officer has looked at my data?
these can be very specific cases that comes regulated by law if it can be done, but it has to be like under criminalist investigation or something but usually it's not allowed.
Okay.
Phillip, as this rollout initially, I mean, before all the court and injunctions and stopping of everything, would you say that there was an understanding by the general population of what was about to happen? And then making it mandatory, or, it was, you had to come out and get this card. Those two seem to be, there seems to be dissonance between the two. Like, here we are sharing this information about why you need this, and then we're making you come out and get it. Was there a reason why then it was made mandatory? And do you feel enough information was shared in the initial steps?
Thank you. Well, the predicament we are facing in this country is a bit different from the Estonian one, because we realize that we were developing for the first time in history, a single national population register in Kenya, which has not been there. What has been there before is different sets of data being managed by different identity registration agencies differently. Different sets of data being managed differently in what you can normally call in a silo whatever setup. So you find that now you have information in your birth certificate that is not reading the same in your national ID,
Right.
that's not reading the same in your passport, yet you're the same person. So this actually was providing an opportunity for fraudsters to operate in. And also it was a very fertile ground for identity theft. You remember there was sometimes whereby your passport gets lost in Nairobi, you are sure somebody else is going to duplicate it and use it to travel.
Yes.
And there was even a time whereby the first generation ID You could steal somebody's ID, pluck out the picture, put yours, laminate it, and you proceed. So with this kind of setup and historical background that you're coming from, it was important for us to consolidate the identity registration regime in this country into one, to avoid all those issues we're talking about, mainly fraud. Kenya had been hit so hard by terrorists at some point, and these terrorists who had infiltrated our country had obtained identity documentation, Kenyan identity documentation. How did they get that? So we had a very strong feeling of consolidating and securing identity data. Now, being the first time that Kenya is doing this, the challenge was, how do you rally people, how do you marshal people to come and register? And remember, for you to start a population database from scratch, you must register a big mass of people so that now you can have some data to start working on, and then the rest of the people missed out can now join as we continue. That is normally the practice all over the world if you're starting a population database. You don't just go and consolidate the ones that are existing and merge them together. You'll merge them with a lot of errors that have been existing before. So you create a new one. Now, the question is, how do you marshal people? You can do it in many ways. You can create an incentive. You can create maybe a use case that is appealing to people. You can use the method maybe we used, telling people by this date you must register. Now, to go back to the issue, why did we give people timelines? We had, for you to register, capture a population database of Kenyans for the first time, a mass registration must happen. Mass registrations means quite a number of things. You have to procure biometric kits, which we did. About 35,000 biometric kits were procured. We have them up to now. You have to hire cashiers. You have to hire staff to do that, because it's a temporary activity. It's like the way we do census. You have to hire quite a big number of people. So for us, we had to hire upwards of 42,000, actually 50,000 people, if you bring in the government officers. These 50,000 people, you're paying them 1,000 shillings per day. Times 50,000. That's 50 million in a day. Then we did the exercise for a period of 54 days. These 54 days included His Excellency, the President's extension of 1 week. So 54 days times 50 million shillings per day. You can imagine how much money that is. And given the way the Kenya is currently, we have limitations in terms of money availability. So we had a fixed budget. So we had to set up a timeline, a fixed timeline, so that within that budget, within that period of time, we register as many people as we are. So people had to be marshaled, people had to be coerced, people had to be motivated,
the government had to be government.
It had to be so that people would go and register. And by the way, by us doing that, we got 37 million Kenyans, which is it's a big achievement. I don't remember any other
What success rate was that? I mean,
even the elections
against your
getting
target.
people to vote, you don't get numbers.
You
like
don't
that.
get those numbers. IBC is struggling to get to meet
Maybe
the
they
target.
can ask you how you did it.
Yes.
Just become
For
government.
us.
We are having a conversation with the Senior Administrator for Huduma Namba, Phillip Lemarasia, from the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government. We're also having a conversation with Silvia Lips. She is from Estonia. She is one of those who worked in the government of Estonia to roll out their own Huduma Namba. We know about it. It's called Eric.
Do you know that we are not going to hear the end of this thing for the next 12 months?
Why would you want to hear the end of Eric?
It has begun.
Surely. You've told us the kind of hurdles that you've had since starting this project in 2018. Even going back beyond 2018, the conversation about integrating all personal data and information within government had started. Even in the Kibaki era, I remember hearing some conversations. In 2013, in fact, Jubilee's manifesto was talking about delivering this as one of their deliverables. So it was there in government. When you start rolling it out, and then you realize, we don't have a data protection law. We don't have data protection regulations. Oh my God, we don't have a department that will be handling this. We need to set it up and put it in law. Oh, no, we need to have, impact assessment framework in it. I ask you, had you done any benchmarking before rolling out this Huduma Namba project?
I think Government had actually taken time to plan. And we need to remind ourselves that actually the attempt we're having now in the national rollout of Huduma Namba is actually the 5th attempt. There have been 4 other previous attempts in the history of this country. This is well documented. We can share the documentation on that with you. The first attempt was in 2008 when government tried to do a similar initiative. It could not go through. Another attempt was done in 2011 period. It did not go through. We had another attempt in 2012, 2013, yeah, and also another last attempt. Actually, there was even an earlier one in 2006. So if you combine the 2006 attempt, the 2008, the 2010 attempt, the 2012 attempt, those are 4 attempts on the rollout of this particular initiative. What were the problems at that time? The problems were mainly laboring on the legal mechanisms that were in place or were supposed to be put in place. And secondly, the procurement-related issues. You realize there's a lot of heavy procurement that is involved with this kind of project. So, and when you talk about big procurement in this country, it is a road many people.
Yeah, we know.
You're not very comfortable going through. So procurement issues and legal issues crippled the other 4 previous attempts. And you can see the same problems is just trying to haunt us.
Yeah, it's like you haven't learned anything from those previous attempts. That's the question I'm asking. I mean, having gone through these hurdles 4 times previously, legal. How is it that we get into 2018, we start another project, and one of the first things is legal hurdle? We don't have a legal framework that talks about protecting the data that we are collecting.
So now we have learned quite a lot because you see, as at now, I mentioned earlier, we have already developed 4 legal instruments within a period of 2 years. The other 4 attempts, they had not developed much legal instruments. There was an attempt to do only maybe 1 legal instrument. Now, the learning process has been beneficial to us. But again, even in as much as we have learned the hard way, still, even implementing legal instruments as at now is still not easy. For you to develop an act, one particular act of parliament successfully from the concept, from the beginning when you're supposed to be doing public participation, all the way get it through parliament and convince the MPs for them to accede to it, one piece of legislation is a big task. It can take even 3-4 years down the line, as we've done 4. And we're actually doing a 5th piece of legislation, which will actually answer to all these legal hurdles. That's very important for Kenyans to know. This 5th piece of legislation, which is actually a product of lessons learned 4 years down the line and even now, is what we call the Huduma Bill. Huduma Bill has been drafted. We have drafted it since the last 2 years, in addition to the other bits of legislation. And this Huduma Bill is currently in Parliament. We developed it through all the stages that were supposed to be taken through before Parliament, and we successfully submitted it to Parliament. It has already gone through the first reading in Parliament. Currently, the Departmental Committee on National Security and Administration is engaging on the bill. Now, that particular committee is doing a very important thing for Kenyans as of now, because the process of development of the bill to become an act requires that once the bill is submitted to Parliament, the relevant committee picks it up, takes it through another round of public participation, another round of stakeholder engagement, in addition to what we had already done. Because even us, we did public engagement and we did stakeholder engagement. But now Parliament again does the same. This is just one of the ways to ensure that at the end of the day, as many opinions, suggestions, and constructive engagement is done on the bill. So right now, the parliamentary committee is handling this. We have had stakeholder engagements with them in Mombasa last weekend. This weekend, we're meeting the civil society in Naivasha, so the civil society can have a chance to express their points on the bill. And when this happens, then the product, this particular bill, will become enriched. So any good, positive idea that can be accommodated into the bill will be done so by the parliamentary committee. And I wish you could give them a chance also to come here, the chairman of the parliamentary committee, to also tell you basically the journey they're taking this bill through, so that now it can be more clear.
Right. Silvia, maybe give us an example, or maybe some experiences that a card like this, where essentially all your information is, how has that changed the experience of operation in Estonia, for example? What are things then that you're able to do when you have all this information in one place?
Well, basically, I think with this particular number, we have built our electronic identity on it, and electronic identity enables access to any service, basically, to be carried out online. So it means that people don't have to come and queue in the public offices anymore. So they actually save quite a lot of time. And based on some of the calculations that we have done, how much we have saved, so to speak, time, then it was mentioned in some of the sources that by having those actions or services online, citizens save about 7 days in a year to do something else with the time.
Just hold the thought. So you're saying every citizen saves the equivalent of 7 days.
Yes, every year.
So if you multiply that by the population, what's the population of your country?
Well, we have a small, you have already more successful than we have, that you have rolled it out for 7 million, you said?
37.
Okay, we have 1.3 million people,
Yes,
but still.
But 1.3 times 7. Those are many days.
Yeah, you're about almost 8 million.
Yes, so
days.
now you divide that by months and years. So essentially you're saying, in terms of the hours that you save, it amounts to a great deal of time. And that can easily be computed
Into something else.
And to understand what else you could have done with that particular
With that
time. Yes.
What was the uptake initially when you rolled it out in Estonia? And you're saying the people, they have the number, but they're not using the number because the services are not really been integrated. But legally, you hear the hurdles that we've gone through in this country. Legal.
Yeah.
Legal. Did you have the same challenges?
From the legal side, actually, this EID or the ID card has been compulsory
ERIC.
for every person. So every person has to have it. However, there is no liability that if you don't take the card, so then like
They're gonna
nothing
fine
happened.
you or toss you in jail.
Yeah, no, nothing
Yeah.
like that. But I think the biggest actually punishment, so to speak, is that you just cannot have the services conveniently. And I think
Which is a
this-
punishment on its own.
Exactly. So I think this kind of a soft measures, we have been more inviting people, not like threatening or keeping them away from the services. So and exactly giving this kind of small treats, and as people can see that they really benefit from it. So if you get already like one service very conveniently online, you come after for more.
Actually, talking of benefits, because I could argue that benefits are perhaps more attractive than anything that is punitive. One of the problems that a developing country like ours has is one of employment. And whenever we talk about automation, we talk about digitalization, we talk about machines taking over the role of people, the one thing that comes to our mind is our people will not have employment. How does such a system help with the employment or unemployment issue?
That's a good question, because what we have seen that, okay, people a little bit afraid, especially from the government side, that, okay, now the services are digitalized and now we might have not room for like we don't have a job anymore. But actually this is not the case, because you open up for opportunities for more services, for more to the quality side. We see that actually we can use the existing workforce even more efficiently, and we can invest more like this kind of manual and monotonic labor with something much more useful for our people good. So I think it's also one of those things that people are more even motivated from the government side to do something for the people, because you don't do this monotone work
all the time.
all the time.
Phillip, Silvia said something that was really interesting. In the beginning, there was really no deficit of trust when it came to government. Do you think that's a factor here? Because when this happened, there was outcry and said, okay, so what is happening here? Government is trying to control us. They want to know where we are at all times. They want to be able to use this information to be able to control or curtail our activities or movement. Is the trust deficit of government an issue here? And then how do you then debunk and demystify these things which are reality for some people?
Yes, this idea is new to Kenya, and it's a big idea, a very big idea, very noble idea, very new, looking very strange. And you realize as human beings, we have resistance to change. It's a fact of life. That being the case, there had to be resistance unless people are really educated about the benefits of the project. So we face that resistance, not necessarily because people are against government, but because it's a new thing that is looking very strange. So we are here actually basically to try and demystify this, and I wish this engagement can be taken further and further in all media platforms so that we concentrate on talking about the benefits. For the Estonian population, they looked at how they could benefit by getting tax refunds. If you have an Estonian Huduma card, you're eligible for a tax refund. If you don't have, you don't get a tax refund, and people want money. So people actually rushed to get the card so they could apply for tax refunds. So it worked for them. For our case here in this country, we are looking at immediate beneficial use cases that may be more appealing to the public. And on this particular regard, we are working very closely with the NHIF, National Hospital Insurance Fund, who under the Universal Medical Cover project that His Excellency the President is very passionate about. The NHIF is supposed to cover all Kenyans under the Universal Medical Coverage Scheme. We are working with them, and it will actually be one of the pilot use cases that we want to roll out. If we go that way, then we'll attract a very big population of Kenyans. Secondly, we also...
Philip, though, in this particular case, Estonia was an incentive, a positive incentive to use.
Yes.
The regulations that have been published by the Ministry of Health and NHIF on getting everybody into the compulsory membership of NHIF is sort of punitive. You are not an NHIF active member, you will not access government services.
And on top of that, we can fine you a certain amount of money.
No,
So
not
basically,
actually.
NHIF,
You don't have a card.
Huduma number is now going to be used to be showing that this person has not paid an NHIF, so they will not have access to services.
We have also to change a lot of mindset for people. If you want medical services, currently the cost of medical cover is very expensive. How much is NHIF telling you to pay?
Currently, 500 or 17.
6,000 a year.
Yeah.
A year. That is a bit affordable for quite a big population of Kenyans, and even for the population of Kenyans who may not be able to afford that amount of money. Organizations, insurance schemes, other small level insurance schemes can come in and assist those people. So we want to pilot with NHIF because you see, health is a factor everybody wants to be involved in. Now, another use case that we're looking at is a pension benefit scheme, because currently the pensions department, originally as it was, had a lot of loopholes. So we're working very closely with them to ensure that pensioners also benefit as one of the pilot use cases. A third one that I can mention for now is our cooperation and working relationship that we're having with the Inua Jamii social benefit scheme, whereby the disadvantaged population in this country are getting monthly stipends to support them. So we want to partner with the organizations handling that, so that we also give access, fast, efficient, effective access to social benefit scheme if you have a Huduma card. Because again, at the end of the day, all these institutions, NHIF, pensions, and social benefit scheme require their members to register biometrically before they get the services. Yet we have already registered Kenyans biometrically. So why that duplication? Because biometric registration is not cheap. You have to hire casual laborers in their thousands. You've got to procure the biometric kits in their thousands also. You also have to procure softwares to manage the systems, which is very, very expensive. So why should the different government agencies do biometric registration differently for the same Kenyans that we have also, again, as Huduma number, registered biometrically, and we have their data? So we're trying to cure that particular duplication and make it very cost effective and save the country money, because already we have a problem of funding based on the treasury.
Philip,
information they give us.
do you really believe that the user experience then will change this mindset?
The user experience, yes, will change the mindset of Kenyans significantly. It has been a new project, it's a new idea, so naturally there'll be resistance, but it's upon us to be able to debunk and explain to Kenyans the benefits more. We dwell on the benefits more. And again, we must remind all of us that this project is not a Kenyan idea. Estonia is here with us. They're telling us how they have successfully rolled theirs. If you look in the social media, you can see issues about Ghana. Ghana, they are much ahead of us. They started behind us. They're now ahead of us. Actually, their digital ID has become a digital passport,
Yes.
electronic passport. But here in Kenya, we're playing catch-up now to Ghana, which is unfortunate. We should have been ahead of them. And again, the idea about digital systems, digital identity card,
Yep.
answers to very important pieces of international legislation. For example, the Constitution of Kenya itself provides that it's a right for Kenyans to be registered, registered securely. The current registration may not be very secure. That's why we're having infiltration by foreigners into our registration systems. So the Constitution of Kenya talks about it's a right of Kenyans to be registered. Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights basically says that everybody has a right to be registered and recognized before the law as an individual. That's Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you want to talk about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, it states that every child has a right to be registered.
Yep.
Again, we need to mention that on the same note, the United Nations is very passionate about legal identity, very passionate about it. That to the extent that the United Nations as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG number 16.9, talks about legal identity for all. And on this, the UN is very keenly monitoring the Kenyan rollout. In fact, they have a task force that they have set up to monitor the Kenyan rollout, the United Nations itself. They have a task force set up specifically to see how we are rolling out in Kenya among the other 13 countries in Africa who are trying to do similar initiatives. So we hope that we'll be the first, so that we become a case study for the rest of Africa. But it's okay. We are still we're getting there.
We're still on course.
We're getting there.
Answer this key concern also by many, that this is like Big Brother watching. You give just all your information to the government has access to all your information at the same time. It's Big Brother watching. It facilitates government spying on you all the time. This is not just a Kenyan concern, it's a global concern. How do you respond to that, those concerns?
Well, government needs to know its people, but in as much as we say that, we need to also remember that already government has your data. Your immigration data, your birth certificate data, your ID data is with government. It's not with a private entity per se. So what we're just doing is putting all that information, all that data into one basket for ease of management, for convenience, and the rest. But in as much as we say that, we also realize that we have gone to great extent to develop the Data Protection Act. And I said also we developed the Data Protection Civil Regulations to manage Huduma number system. That we have done. And also the Huduma bill that we're developing. Now, the Huduma bill and the Data Protection Act provides very punitive measures for people who violate data, be it a government officer, be it any other person, any other entity for that matter. So if you violate usage of somebody's data as a government officer, as government itself, you will now be at very serious crossroads with the Data Protection Act on one side, and again, you'll be violating the Huduma bill, Huduma Act, assuming the Huduma bill becomes an act. We've also put punitive measures within the Huduma bill for violation of data. So for any violation of data, you'll actually be facing two charges. One from the Data Protection Act and one from the Huduma Act, if it sees the light of day. Yeah, so that's one measure to ensure that at the end of the day, in as much as government has your data, the government officers are not misusing their data. The punitive measures go to the extent of, for one violation, you pay to the tune of $30,000 which is 3 million Kenya shillings. So if you're paying 3 million Kenya shillings under Data Protection Act, another 3 million Kenya shillings under Huduma Act, why would you even try?
Strong deterrence.
Yes,
As we conclude
that's
the conversation, Silvia, did you face the same kind of concerns from the citizens of Estonia? Is the government going to spy on me now that I'm giving it all this information?
Well, in Estonia, it's slightly different because we are not keeping all the data in one big database. We have developed our special solution. It's called X-Road. So it's kind of a highway between the different databases. So if you have, for example, your personal identification data in one database, your health data in other one, your document data in third one, and between all those different databases, when you need the services, we have this kind of secure data exchange layer that we have built that enables secure access to the particular information what is needed for the particular service that is provided. So we have a little bit decentralized approach and made it even more hard to actually violate this kind of laws and to ensure that actually this kind of big brother thing is not the issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Silvia Lips is from Estonia. She's a PhD student at Taltech. This is Tallinn University of Technology. She's also one of the officers who helped Estonia roll out its Huduma Namba. And we also have the Kenyan Huduma Namba Administrator, Phillip Lemarasia, the Senior Administrator of the National Integrated Identity Management System. Identity Management System. That's a Huduma Namba. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And come back again soon.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.